Hi, this is Quick Recapped. Today, I am going to explain the Titan movie. That is an science fiction thriller film. Watch out and take care. In this movie, as Earth approaches extinction and doom, a family participates in a scientific experiment to determine humankind's survival on Saturn's moon. In the first scene, in 2048, on our planet due to overpopulation and lost the access of natural resources, the government initiates a plan to genetically ready a group of 14 soldiers to establish a new civilization on Titan, one of Saturn's moons. The chosen volunteers and their families are provided with advanced and comfortable homes in a dedicated community. Among them is Rick, a former pilot, who relocates to the new settlement with his wife Abigail, a doctor, and their child Lucas. The program's leader, Dr. Collingwood, sees great potential in Rick due to his past experience as an Air Force pilot who survived 3 days alone in the Syrian desert after being shot down without food or water. Rick and his wife Abigail have joined the program to secure a better future for their son. However, Abigail expresses concern to Dr. Collingwood about Rick's health, fearing that he may become seriously ill. Dr. Collingwood reassures her that while this is a possibility, it can be managed with proper post-treatment care. After the volunteers settle into their new neighborhood on Titan, they attend their first meeting with Dr. Collingwood to begin the treatment process. Dr. Collingwood starts with a presentation that highlights the plight of our planet, which has been ravaged by human activity, leading to resource depletion and overpopulation. He explains that Titan is the only other place in our solar system with an atmosphere and primitive ecosystem, but it also poses several challenges, including liquid methane oceans and lakes, a nitrogen-rich atmosphere, and freezing temperatures. Rather than attempting to terraform Titan, the decision was made to genetically modify the volunteers to adapt to these harsh conditions. During a meeting with Dr. Collingwood, one of the volunteers expresses concern about the possibility of the body rejecting the treatment. Although Dr. Collingwood assures them that the clinical trials were successful, he acknowledges that there are no guarantees for everyone's survival. Another volunteer continues to question the program, but Rick, who along with the other volunteers was chosen for their ability to survive extreme conditions, shuts him down and suggests that he can leave if he is unhappy with the plan. After the meeting, the volunteers are given card keys to access the base and proceed to the lab for their first shot of the 300 they will receive over the next few weeks. Dr. Freya explains the purpose of each shot, but Rick only grasps half of the information. From that point on, Rick's family adapts to a new routine, which is not much different from their previous one. Lucas attends school while Abigail takes care of their home and supports Rick during his treatments. The volunteers develop close bonds with each other and enjoy socializing outside of the base by hosting dinner parties and barbecues in their neighborhood. However, the conversations at these gatherings can sometimes take a dark turn, as one volunteer expresses concerns about being unable to return to Earth after their 2-year stint on Titan. At one of their final barbecue parties, the alcohol flows freely, and Abigail becomes dizzy from drinking too much. As Rick helps her upstairs, he suddenly begins coughing and struggling to breathe. In the end, it is Rick who collapses while Abigail looks on in alarm. After Abigail tends to Rick's illness and cares for him through the night, the program's head, Dr. Collingwood, is pleased with the progress of the volunteers' genetically modified DNA samples. He decides it's time for a significant test of their abilities. The group is asked to remain underwater for an extended period of time without oxygen tanks. As time passes, only Rick and another volunteer named Tally remain. They turn the situation into a friendly competition, and Tally ultimately stays underwater for 39 minutes before surfacing. However, to everyone's surprise, Rick doesn't resurface with Tally. Instead, he continues swimming and moving through the water with incredible speed and agility, almost like a dolphin. This remarkable ability amazes and shocks everyone watching. Later that night, Rick impresses his son with a new move in the garden pool, before putting him to bed. Lucas mentions his late grandfather and how he would have been proud of Rick's accomplishments. Rick then joins Abigail in the pool, but their intimacy is interrupted when Abigail notices black veins on Rick's body. However, the veins disappear before they can address it. During the volunteer's first surgery, a wife named Rayanne visits Abigail and confides in her about her fears regarding the program and her husband's participation. Abigail reassures Rayanne by reminding her of the importance of their mission in saving humanity and securing a better future for their children. After Rick's surgery, he returns home in good health and spends time with his family. Abigail is relieved to see him doing well, but she is also concerned about the potential side effects of the treatment. One night, Abigail wakes up to find Rick missing from bed. She discovers him in the kitchen, using ice to cool down his overheated skin. Abigail fetches a bigger bucket of cold water for him, and they play a game to see who can keep their hands in the water longer. Abigail withdraws her hands after a few minutes, unable to tolerate the cold, but Rick keeps his hands in the water and reveals that he cannot feel the cold anymore. The following day, Rick and Abigail take a run together and pause to appreciate a beautiful view. Rick expresses his disappointment in not being able to save the planet. Meanwhile, the volunteers continue with their experiments, which involve simulating Titan's atmosphere with masks and swimming in freezing water for long periods of time. Despite some volunteers having to leave for the day due to the extreme conditions, Tally stubbornly stays in the water and learns to meditate underwater with Rick's help. One afternoon, after completing the tests, Rick and Tally notice they are losing hair in the showers. Suddenly, they hear screaming and discover one of the women is having a seizure and vomiting blood. After the tragic death of one of the volunteers, the doctors attempted to save her but were unsuccessful, leaving the group to deal with their first loss. In a meeting, some of the volunteers express their fears of facing the same fate, but others remind them of the known risks. Although they shouldn't drink, they decide to do it anyway to help them cope. While Rayanne comforts her husband Zane, Tally's husband Andrew helps Abigail in the kitchen, where he shares the story of how he and Tally met and fought for their relationship. Then Tally joins them, revealing that Andrew is now eager to start a family. During dinner, Abigail observes that all the volunteers have occasional black veins. Suddenly, they hear screaming from the garden, and they rush outside to find Zane having a breakdown and attacking Rayanne. The other volunteers manage to restrain him, and Abigail takes Rayanne away to safety. The next day, frees to the neighborhood to give the volunteers extra medicine that will stop them from having the same problems that the dead woman and Zane did. Abigail becomes concerned about the high doses of medicine being given to the volunteers, but is unable to speak to Collingwood. Later, Rick becomes ill and starts vomiting blood. When Abigail takes a sample of Rick's blood, she discovers that there are hidden cameras in their home. Despite Rick's peeling skin and hair loss, he doesn't seem overly worried. However, Abigail is increasingly concerned about his health. Abigail examines Rick's blood under the microscope the following day and observes that it has turned black. Soon after, the volunteers undergo a significant procedure to give them cat-like night vision, but Rick experiences some pain and bleeding in his eyes. In response, he is taken to the lab for another surgery, and Abigail takes the opportunity to confront Collingwood about the apparent presence of an unknown organism inside Rick's body and the covert surveillance cameras in the house. He reassures Abigail that his temporary blindness is just a part of the process and he will be fine soon. Despite this explanation, Abigail still suspects that there is something more to the situation. Collingwood dismisses her concerns and sends her home. Abigail then goes back to her house to pack some clothes for Rick when she hears sirens in the distance. Abigail steps outside and finds that Zane's house is surrounded by the military. Despite being prohibited from getting closer, she witnesses the horrific scene of a mutated Zane hurling Rayanne through a window, which instantly kills her. The soldiers storm into the house and shoot Zane, killing him. At the base, Abigail takes care of Rick and hears the arrival of more soldiers. With Collingwood occupied, Abigail seizes the opportunity to swipe Rick's card key and conduct some covert investigation. She takes care to evade the watchful eyes of the security personnel by concealing herself in strategic locations. Finally, she infiltrates Collingwood's office, where she discovers files detailing the infusion of animal DNA with that of the volunteers, in an attempt to create Homo titanians, the next stage of human evolution according to Collingwood. Meanwhile, Collingwood is in a meeting with Colonel Solano and representatives from NASA, who express their disapproval of the program and deem it unproven science. The volunteers are exhibiting violent behavior, and Colonel Solano, along with NASA officials, believe that the program is entering into criminal territory and should be shut down as unproven science. They draw comparisons to the Nazis and demand that the experiment be removed from the base. However, Collingwood and his advisor remind them that the ministers of defense have the final say and that they won't leave unless ordered to do so. After the meeting, Freya also expresses concerns to Collingwood about the experiment, but he disregards her warnings. When Rick is released, Collingwood accompanies him home and assures him that his sight will return in 24 hours. The reason for Zane's mutation was a miscalculation in the brain's ability to process heightened senses. A new surgery is suggested to fix it. Abigail confronts Collingwood and demands the truth, and he finally admits to injecting animal DNA into the volunteers. Though Collingwood understands Abigail's worries, he says that they have always known the risks. Rick needs the new procedure to survive, which upsets Abigail, stays distant for a while. The day after the procedure, Rick removes his bandages and confirms that his sight is fine. He shaves his head to prevent bald spots and later discovers that he can see every detail in the darkness. Impressed with his new ability, he calls Collingwood to confirm that he will undergo the procedure. All of the volunteers undergo surgery while their families stay at home, but there are many complications, and the majority of them don't survive. Only Rick and Tally manage to make it through the process unscathed. The following day, Andrew, Abigail, and Lucas visit Rick and Tally and are horrified to see that they have transformed into mutated creatures that can only communicate through touch and sound frequencies too low for humans to hear. Abigail weeps as she watches Rick place his hand against the glass barrier that separates them. Adding to her distress, Collingwood hands her Rick's wedding ring and her tears get worse. Rick, who seems unfazed by the situation, Abigail is taken aback by this and starts to feel even more afraid of the changes in Rick and Tally. Rick spends most of his time in the pool, struggling to adapt to human clothing, and accidentally hits Abigail while trying to help her. This leaves Abigail terrified and unable to tolerate his touch. Though Rick and Tally will soon depart for Titan, Abigail is deeply unsettled by their transformation and the implications of the experiment. Rick spends most of his time in the pool, feeling more comfortable there than in the house. As the army approaches, Abigail rushes upstairs with Lucas to hide. One night after putting Lucas to bed, Abigail looks outside and discovers Tally entering the garden with her hand covered in blood. Rick doesn't look bothered by this and approaches Tally so they can communicate through some weird tentacles that come out from their fingers. At that moment, the soldiers arrive and discover Andrew dead in the shower. The soldiers manage to tranquilize Tally, but she uses her tentacles to kill one of them as they approach. In response, the other soldiers open fire and kill her. Next, the soldiers try to come after Rick, but he easily knocks them out with his new strength. After attempting to drown the last remaining soldier in the pool, Rick is interrupted by Abigail, who hears the commotion and rushes out to stop him. However, it's too late to realize that what he done and Rick's run away. Despite Collingwood's pleas not to harm him, Colonel Solano orders his team to find Rick and bring him in, and said that he don't want to kill him, he want him live in any cost. Abigail and Lucas were relocated to a secure location due to safety concerns. However, Abigail decided to leave when she realized where Rick had gone. After ensuring that she wasn't being followed, Abigail hurried to their secret meeting spot and discovered Rick there. In an act of courage, she offered her hand to show that she was no longer afraid, and when Rick's tentacles clasped her wrist, she kissed him. Unfortunately, their tender moment was interrupted when army helicopters appeared and attacked them, rendering them unconscious. Later, Abigail awoke to find herself at the base with Collingwood at her side, explaining that they had to use force to protect her own safety. The Pentagon has decided to terminate the program and send Rick to Titan immediately, as Tally's research has shown that the new bodies may not survive Earth's atmosphere. However, they cannot forcibly transfer Rick, as it could be lethal. It's up to Abigail to convince him to go. Abigail is taken to see Rick, who is being held captive in a glass cage. Collingwood orders her to administer a shot of quetiapine, which will erase Rick's memories and ensure that he complies with the transfer. Although Abigail is reluctant, Collingwood insists it's the only option. He quickly loses consciousness, while a soldier prepares Rick for the journey to Titan. Rick was only pretending to be unconscious and took advantage of the opportunity to kill the man administering the injection. Collingwood soon discovers that Abigail had swapped the quetiapine with saline, and the soldiers open fire, forcing Rick to flee and hide in the darkness. Abigail and Lucas are reunited with Rick, who is severely injured, while Freya searches for medical supplies, but suddenly all the soldiers show up. Collingwood orders the women to leave or they will shot dead everyone, but Abigail refuses. Tensions escalate, and Collingwood commands the soldiers to open fire. However, Solano defies his orders, refusing to shoot unarmed women and a child. Solano aims his weapon at Collingwood, and the other soldiers follow suit, taking a stand against their commanding officer. Collingwood is taken into custody, and Abigail rushes to Rick's side, holding him in a tight embrace. As they hold each other, Rick is able to recall his most cherished memories. Rick is sent to Titan, where he discovers that his new body has wings, enabling him to soar and fly freely in his new home.
Thanks for watching. Hit the like button if you enjoy the movie.